Hey class, the goal of this video is going to again re-explain the purpose and the philosophy behind what comparing and contrasting will do for you as a student and a historian and a decision maker. In addition to that, it's going to address all the expectations for the assignment that we will complete in the block on Tuesday or Wednesday depending on your class. Alright, so comparing and contrasting. The philosophy behind it is, number one, as historians we've already learned a little bit about determining the reliability of resources. Now that we can critically assess this information, we can then begin to use it to make decisions. In addition to that, compare and contrast is a very valuable tool for building a deeper understanding of the actual information. So it isn't just all these terms that we're going to be learning about. They're not just disconnected, but they have one clear correlation. You'll find that your memory and your retention and understanding will improve with compare and contrast. Alright, so as I was saying in class, compare and contrast allows us to analyze past events in order to determine whether or not that past event is relevant to the future. The example that I often like to use is the Great Depression, comparing that to the most recent recession that the United States has gone through. Now, what we can do is we first need to analyze things to determine whether or not they are different or similar throughout a period of time. If it's different, then it's probably going to be irrelevant to our situation and decision making. Now, if it is similar, then it is relevant to our decision, and we should probably investigate the choices that our ancestors have made to inform our future choices so that we know the pitfalls to avoid, as well as maybe some of the good, wise decisions that they made that we can emulate. So then, after you've done that analysis, you can determine whether or not you should or shouldn't take a certain action. The example that I often like to cite for this, that has actually been used by a lot of modern economists, is the dealing with the most recent recession. If you look at the Great Depression and the causes of the Great Depression, and then the subsequent follow-up as to how the government responded, we've been able to learn a lot about what they did right and what they did wrong. And what they've done is they've tried to look at those mistakes that they've made, and most recently, when the financial system began to collapse, they identified some of these causes, and they noticed the similarities, and they began to take certain action that was based off of what we have learned from the Great Depression. And that's an example of how this skill is actually used for your decision making. Alright, now here are the assignment details. Here's the prompt, and you can find this on a PDF within the folder. I will also post it for that day. Compare and contrast the Massachusetts Bay Colony to all the other colonies. So we essentially have two units here. The Massachusetts Bay Colony, and you're comparing that one to all these other colonies. So these represent one solid unit, as well as the Massachusetts Bay representing one solid unit or topic that you're going to be analyzing. Alright, so this needs to be complete by the end of the class period. I'm not going to give you any time to watch this video. That needs to be taken care of ahead of time. If you didn't, then you better catch up on, or catch your fellow group mates up on what they need to take care of. You will complete this as a group. You'll complete it in an outline format, and I'll show an example of that below or in a little bit later. And then you're going to submit one copy for your group via the Compare and Contrast Early European Settlement Dropbox on Schoology. Alright, the analysis must contain two general similarities and two differences. And this, with that, when you're talking about the two general similarities and differences, one needs to, both of them need to be associated with the places that we're discussing. So in this case, the example would be Massachusetts Bay Colony and the other English colonies are similar in that X and Y, and then they are also different in that they are A and B. Okay. Make sure that you use the AGM spectrum to determine and organize a lot of key information. A little bit more about that later. Each similarity and difference must be substantiated with at least 4 pieces of evidence. Again, I'll show you how to set that up in a moment. The evidence must come from both regions. Again, I'll show you that a little bit more later. And then finally, at least 2 pieces of information must come from the Story of Us clip that I'm going to show at the very beginning of class. Your analysis must address the causes between the similarities and the differences between the colonies. Alright, so your thesis. Let's start there at the top. It must possess the place, the locations that you are comparing and contrasting, in addition to the two similarities and differences. It must be in one sentence. Secondly, the first body paragraph, this is how it should be set up. You would identify the general similarity. Then you would identify the 4 pieces of evidence that are the same between the 2 different topics. So what are 2 pieces of evidence that convey that there is a similarity between the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and they have to come from the Massachusetts Bay Colony? And then you need 2 more pieces of evidence from the other colony to convey that there is a similarity. For each piece of evidence, then you need to explain what about those 4 pieces of evidence are conveying that similarity between those sets of colonies. Now note, you can bunch all of your analysis together. So instead of just repeatedly saying the same sentence over and over, this is how this piece of evidence conveys a similarity between the Massachusetts Bay Colony and the other English colonies. Instead of repeating yourself over and over and over again, you can bunch it all together into one analytical sentence. And then in addition to that, you need to identify the cause, why the similarity or the difference. And a little bit more on that later. Repeat that 3 more times. So you'll do 1 more general similarity and then 2 as a difference. Make sure that while you're creating your outline, you use bullet points, no more than 7 words per line with your bullet points, by the way. And avoid helping verbs and pronouns. All right? Be as concise as possible. Complete sentences only for the thesis as well as the analysis. Now here's an example of what it should look like. Now I didn't actually use any history, but what I did was I used some specific letters to denote what you need to have in your setup. So you begin with your thesis with 4 main ideas: similarity A, similarity B, difference C, difference D. And then body 1 would be about similarity A. You would then use 4 pieces of evidence. As I mentioned before, 2 of them need to be coming from one place. So in this case, place 1 will be Massachusetts Bay Colony, and 2 from the other colonies. Then, after that, you need to explain how each of these pieces of evidence convey a similarity across the board. You would probably want to use the AGM spectrum to organize this information. So, for example, this would be religion. They all practice Christianity, and then you'd find 4 examples to substantiate the idea that they all practice Christianity. Finally, after you've done that, you need to identify the cause as to why all 4 of them are practicing Christianity. Alright, the second to last part that I want to discuss is teamwork. You don't have a lot of time to complete this activity, so it's essential that all of you are informed as to what you need to do and that everybody is contributing at all moments. The very first thing to help out with your time management is make sure that somebody is in charge. Nominate a group leader to set a direction, assign and delegate tasks, and keep people on task as they work. Also, find somebody to type. Now, you can either nominate one person to type up the information that you're researching and find, or what you can do is if you can find a collaborative app, you can work together and collaborate on an online word processor, and then that'll create your final one document that you'll turn in. Make sure that you keep everybody on target. People like to drift. There's not a lot of time. I'm not giving any extensions. Delegate out the responsibility. Now, how I would do that is I would recommend giving the page numbers for each one of the colonies to one person in your group. They're responsible for reading that and identifying all the different characteristics of that particular colony, and then organizing. Is that characteristic religious, economic? Does it have to deal with art, geography, military, social structure, so on and so forth throughout the AGM spectrum? Then, after they have gone through the colony, they report the information to the group as to what they found about the characteristics of those colonies. Then you will group things together. You'll analyze what are the general similarities that run throughout and what are the general differences that run throughout. Again, you have to find 2 of each. Then identify the evidence that substantiates those conclusions of the similarities and differences that you've analyzed, and then explain how exactly those pieces of evidence are conveying that similarity and difference. Finally, identify the cause, and then make sure that the cause is also substantiated with some evidence. So that's how I would go about the teamwork. Now the very last part is how to submit this assignment. You're going to submit this assignment 1 per group via the Dropbox on Schoology. So once you complete it, let's go to Schoology. Alright, you'll go to the Unit 1 Early Natives and European Settlement. You click on that folder. Then you scroll on down, comparing European North American colonies. In this case, they're largely British. And right here is the drop box. You click that, and then over to the right hand side, you'll need to, where it says submit, this is the teacher point of view, you need to click that and then go find the document and then upload that. You can see right here, for your purposes and understand how I'm going to grade you, all the information is right there for the expectations. Alright, that should about do it. Please let me know if you have any specific questions and I'll address those in class.